In the UK, assuming your car is at least 3 years old, you'll need to take it to an MOT tester once a year to get its certificate renewed. It can be a massive pain when you drop your car off and then a couple hours later you get a phone call to say that your car has failed, and especially over something as trivial as a single light bulb has gone out, something you could have checked yourself before going to the tester. Once your car fails, you have 10 working days to remedy anything that they found that was wrong to qualify for a partial retest, meaning they will only check for the things that they already found were broken and check that they've actually been repaired adequately. Most garages won't charge for that, but they do have their own policies, so do make sure that you check with them if your car does fail what their policy is. I should also mention that after the 10 days, it's not like your car is bricked and off the road forever. It just means that you will have to have a full retest rather than just the quicker partial one. So, what are they looking for? Well, there is a lot to cover here, so I'll try and be brief, but let's start with the interior. The first thing is that they're checking your seats are installed correctly and functioning as normal. They won't necessarily be checking that every single heated and massage function works, just that they are at least immediately adjustable and that they are secured to the vehicle. They'll also check that your seat belts are working, including both buckling them, retracting them, and the locking mechanism. They'll be looking for warning lights on your dashboard. Specifically, something like an engine management or engine warning lights constitutes a straight fail, but even something as trivial as a washer fluid level error can be a defect, whether that's minor or major. It's still worth topping up your washer fluid, especially as that's actually something they need to test. So make sure that's topped up, and actually make sure the rest of the fluids in the car are topped up as well. Things like fuel should be enough to run the test, as if it's too low, the tester can refuse to test your vehicle. You should also check things like your oil level that we'll talk about in a second, and even things like AdBlue if you've got a diesel that needs them. Again, make sure that's topped up too. Speaking of the washers, they will actually check if your windscreen washers are working, specifically if the jets are aimed correctly and obviously working, and they'll even check that the wipers are working. Again, they're not looking for the perfect streak-free appearance, they're just looking to make sure that they actually function. They'll also be checking for your visibility out the windscreen, which will include any obstructions that you might have placed, like phone mounts or sat-navs, so make sure you remove those before you go and have the car tested. They'll also be making sure that your steering wheel, well, exists, works, and that the steering column isn't collapsed. And they'll also be making sure that all of your switchgear, like your indicator stalks, wipers, and lights, all function correctly as well. Your brake pedal also needs to be in good working order, specifically mounted correctly and supplying a reasonable amount of pressure. They'll also be checking that you have a speedometer that can be backlit. That is a specific requirement. They'll also be checking that your doors work and that all of your mirrors that should be on the vehicle are present and intact and working fine. As for the exterior, there's a lot there too. You need your front and rear number plates mounted correctly and clearly visible, so not too dirty or tinted or anything obstructing them. You also need every single light working. And when I say every single light, I mean it. That includes your side markers for indicating, that includes any side marker lights that are built into your front or rear headlights, your daytime running lights, of course your headlights and tail lights, your brake lights, at least the full, the 3 positions all light up, all of the indicators, both front and rear, things like your fog lights if fitted, and even your reverse lights, which actually on our Mini don't currently work, so that's something that I am repairing before we go and get an MOT. Specifically for the headlights, they'll also be checking the aim of them, so not too high or too low. It should be fine, but again, it's something that they are testing. They'll also be checking your wheels and tyres. The tyres should have at least the minimum tread depth, which is 1.6 millimeters across the 3/4 central band of the tyre, and you can check that by looking at the little markers that are in the grooves in your tyre. If the grooves are flush with, or even close to flush with the outer edge of the tyre, then they basically need replacing. But if there is plenty of meat between those little markers and the outside edge, then you're good to go. They'll also check for large cuts or bulges to the tyres, although as far as I'm aware they don't check the pressures directly, although of course an obviously flat tyre won't make for a safe car and so likely wouldn't pass. They'll also be checking the wheel rims themselves, which need to be in functional condition. They don't care about your curb rash, they care about large chunks missing or any cracks that are exiting pressure out of the tyre. They'll have a peek at your springs and shock absorbers if they are visible for significantly corroded or rusted springs, rusted and especially leaking shock absorbers, or snapped or cracked springs, but they'll be doing more of that check from under the car later as well. They'll also be looking at the general condition of the body for things like rust, specifically in structural areas. Surface rust, or little, holes or dings in the bodywork that aren't structural, aren't a big deal. It's just where you have rust in those things like the frame rails or on the structural components where that will be a bigger problem. They'll also be checking that all of your doors, your boot lid and your bonnet are operating correctly and are not stuck or, too otherwise inoperable. Oh, and if you have a tow bar, they'll be checking that is mounted securely and that the plug, if you have one, is also fitted in a safe manner. They'll even be checking your fuel filler cap to make sure that it's not leaking any fuel vapor, and they'll be checking that your mirrors are securely attached and that your wiper blades, or your wiper arms and blades, are also, again, securely attached and safe. They'll also be checking in your engine bay for things like the crash structure to make sure that it isn't crumpled. Any visible brake lines aren't leaking, nor is the exhaust, fuel or steering systems, and any visible suspension components like the strut towers are in good condition and so aren't, say, rusted through. Then it's under the car to check for things like major oil leaks, BMWs, or things like your power steering system. If you have a hydraulic system, they'll be checking for your hydraulic lines and fittings, and any steering system, they'll be checking the steering racks, dust boots, and your turret ends and ball joints. They'll also be checking your drive shafts, including the drive shaft boots, the wheel bearings for play in any direction, and even things like your brake discs and pads, both for disc thickness and for the brake pads thickness as well, which you can generally see from just looking through your the gaps in your wheels, which is a good thing to check in general, but especially if you're getting an MOT, it's worth having a quick peek. They'll also be checking for all of the lines and cables, so for example the handbrake cable if you have one, or your fuel lines and brake lines, that they aren't corroded or leaking. They'll also check that your exhaust isn't leaking, especially significantly, nor is the fuel tank, or that its mountings are rusted, that the fuel tank is securely fastened, which is pretty significant. And they'll also be checking that the structure of the car is intact. Again, it's not been in a serious accident. They'll also check your suspension components. This one is arguably the most difficult to check as a layman, but in general, they'll be checking for things like your shock absorbers if they are leaking, your springs if they are cracked or snapped or even just significantly corroded, and that the shock mounts and spring mounts are also in good condition. Also, all of the arms, for example, lower control arms, trailing arms, all of that sort of stuff, that they are also in good condition and not, rusted through. They'll be checking that your bushings are in good order and not significantly cracked or torn. All of the ball joints that are in your suspension, they are in good condition. There's no excess play in any of those bushings or ball joints, and things like your anti-roll bar and anti-roll bar links are all in good condition too. They'll also run some specific tests. Namely, they'll be checking your brakes, both from a standard pedal operation, and they'll get the car on a rolling road and engage the handbrake to check its effectiveness. They'll also be checking the car's emissions, which they'll use a gas probe in the exhaust, both at an idle RPM and a raised RPM, although it can vary if it's under load or not. And that's it. The MOT is a very detailed test, but only for safety-related items. It's not a clean bill of health for your car. They're mostly just checking that your car isn't going to cause danger to anyone else on the road from a lack of repair. So do keep that in mind. It's not a clean bill of health for your engine or your gearbox, but it is also a very important thing to do, so it's worth having a quick look over these items. Now, I appreciate that a number of these items are generally out of the scope of the average car owner-operator, so the key things that I highly recommend anyone check before you go and get an MOT are your lights and your tyres. Your tyres, like I said, are nice and easy to do. Just have a look at them and have a quick feel of those bands that run around the tyre and check to feel those little lumps that are in those grooves. If they are flush with the outside diameter of the tyre, then you need to have them replaced, and it's best to have them replaced before you go and get an MOT. Whereas if there is plenty of meat, if you can grab your fingernail on a load of tyre between that bump and the outside edge that rests on the ground, then that is fine and your tyres are all good. As for testing your lights, you might want a friend to help you to press the brake pedal and put the car into reverse so that you can check those. But in general, all you need to do is stick your hazard lights on, stick every light that you can on, including your dipped and main beams, your running lights, and your fog lights. If you have front, you definitely have rear, but turn on every one that you can, and like I said, have a friend help you by pressing the brake pedal and sticking the car into reverse. If any of those lights are out, including those side markers or any of your daytime running lights, anything like that, you need to have those replaced or fixed before you go and have an MOT. I should also make it clear that if your reverse lights aren't working, but the bulbs are fine, or if you go to replace the bulbs and that doesn't solve the problem is likely with the switch that is on the side or bottom or top or whatever on your gearbox that actually enables or turns on that light. That's the problem we have with the Mini. To get at that switch is really easy, and I'll probably do a little guide on how to do that for anyone that does have one of those Minis, but it's something to keep in mind that specifically for the reverse lights, you might need to just replace the switch on the gearbox rather than the bulbs themselves, although it's worth checking the bulbs first. One final note is it's a good idea to top up your engine oil. Well, it's not part of the test directly, it's a good idea to check it anyway, and it's a really simple process. Open your bonnet with the latch that's normally in either the driver or passenger side footwell, then pull what is normally a yellow tab or ring out and wipe it clean with a towel. Stick it back in all the way down and then pull it back out, and hopefully your oil level is somewhere between the minimum and maximum lines. Ideally, it's right in the middle or in the upper end. In my case, we're getting a little bit close to that minimum line, so we're going to add a touch in just to make sure. But if it's well below or not even coated at all, then that's a really big problem. You need to put some oil in and check for any serious leaks, which also could be a fail on the MOT too. And if it's nicely in the middle, then you're all good and ready to go. So that is the full list of everything that an MOT tester will check for, and the sort of things that anyone can go and check themselves to ensure the most seamless experience in getting an MOT. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Or if you have any of your own thoughts, if you've been caught out by the MOT of not checking silly things like lights, then feel free to let me know in those comments as well. Or if I've missed anything or you have your own recommendations, please do leave those in the comments too. If you want to stay up to date on these videos, both from these sorts of guides and explanations, thoughts, or full reviews of both cars and even car gadgets like the Racebox, then do hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification icon. I have plenty of other videos that you can watch on the end card, so please do check those out. And there'll be a couple of links in the description if you want to support the channel and support me as a creator, both from the TechTeamGB side and my car channel, This at the Wheel. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next video.